This is the good news of Jesus Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Not that long ago, I had an opportunity to go to a Calvary church, a Baptist Calvary church. And I was struck by, first of all, the music was great, right? You know, they have the music, but they have the board there and everybody is singing. And the words are, Jesus was slain, the blood of the Lamb was slain for you. Jesus died so that you could live. Jesus died so that you might not perish, so that you might have eternal life. And so the narrative over and over, I almost couldn't take it, was that we're sinners and that we're to be unbelievably grateful. And I was thinking about it, wow, this is really very emotionally powerful. The idea, think of this, that you're going to get killed or something bad is going to happen to you, and somebody comes in and says, let it happen to me and not you. And they do that, and that person dies and you live. It's wow, that is a very powerful thing. It's very emotional. You can almost feel this sense of obligation and I owe for this because of what happened to me. Somebody came and took away my sin and my transgression. It's very, very powerful. And fortunately, so I was thinking, so what they're saying is, it's a little crinkled. Here's the earth, right? I just get a sense of this earth. So crinkled. No. We've talked about this so much, about the perfect amount of oxygen and gravity and how it's turning and going around the sun and all the atmosphere that's in there, the temperature. The sun is the perfect distance. Just this unbelievably created planet Earth, so beautiful. But the narrative is that all the billions of people that are on this planet are all a bunch of freaking sinners. They didn't even become a sinner. They were born a sinner. Born a sinner. This little child, born a sinner. And that's the narrative. So, where did this come from? Well, it came from their concept that God is perfect, so therefore God creates this perfect world. We're created in the image and likeness of God. In his image, he created us. And then as time went on, they started to see some of the flaws and issues that human beings have. So they're in their mind, they're thinking, well, wait a minute. There had to be this state of perfection because God could not create human beings like us who are flawed. So therefore, God created human beings and they were perfect. And then they fell, the fall of man, Adam and Eve, that story. Rather than seeing it as a story of the birth of consciousness, who told you were naked, they had so now all of a sudden a human being becomes aware. So there's an awareness. Surely if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will die. Human beings know, we all know, that our body isn't going to last forever and that we will leave our body. So the story is really a birth of consciousness and becoming human. But in their understanding, it was perfection fallen. And so now we have this concept of being a fallen humanity. Along comes Augustine with this whole story of being fallen, and he comes up with the doctrine of original sin. So then there became this sense of, well, you got to get your infant baptized immediately, because God forbid this child isn't baptized and dies, it's going to go to hell or limbo or something like that. This is very, very powerful in our psyche, isn't it? You could see people who don't even come to church, right? They never come to church, but they got to get that kid baptized. It's just ingrained in their consciousness that somehow, I don't know why, but I better get my child in there to be baptized and get that magic going on there. Such a powerful, powerful thing in our mind. So I thought about that, and I think, like so often, and we know all of our lives, right? I was listening to something coming down here about trauma and how, we're born. You could have a child. Is the child held enough? Is the child yelled at and screamed at? People grow up. People are throwing things, hitting people, hitting each other. Child can grow in fear. The stories you hear of people, like the first 10, 15 years of their life, nothing but anxiety and stress. So all these things, get encoded into our sense of understanding ourselves. What we need to do, though, is we need to take a look at who are we really? Who really are we? Are we the things that have happened to us? So if you go back to that incident where I asked you to be like, think of yourself being aware. I can remember, and this is I was like, I don't know, we were like 8 or 9 years old, and my uncle was going to take us to a Ranger hockey game. And my cousins and I were in the car. He went in to get the tickets, and we were fooling around, and it was like this used car. And I don't know, Michael kicked something, and the whole chassis underneath the steering wheel collapsed down about 5 inches. And we're like, oh my God. And so my uncle comes in, who was a little grouchy. What the, and we're like going, I don't know, we were, maybe the sun came in. The stuff we came up with to dodge this bullet. But I can remember that experience very, very vividly. Now, probably you remember those experiences that are kind of like negative or you're scared. They have a way of remembering, you remember that more than those great times you had an ice cream on the boardwalk or something. But I remember being there, and the awareness called Drew was present to that. And now here we are 50 years later, and that awareness, as I'm standing here looking at all of you, that awareness has remained the same. That's the essence of who I am. There's things that have happened to us along the way, which we can start a story about who we are. Like, I am this thing that happened to me. I am if I was not treated well. So if I wasn't treated well, then I can often walk around thinking, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve things. Just feeling bad about oneself. So I've asked Terry now, can you share a story of yourself where you had this awareness?
Yeah, I can. So when Drew asked me to think of a time in my childhood when I remember being conscious, I immediately thought of this instance when I was in 2nd grade. My teacher was Miss Condon. And Miss Condon was as tough as any nun I've ever had. And we had a test in phonics. Does anybody remember when phonics was a subject? Okay, so we had a phonics test. And I was really good. I was a good speller. I was good at everything. But on this particular phonics test, it was A, B, C, D answers. And I made the mistake of putting my answers one line above where they should be. So I failed the test. And Miss Condon said, you have to take this home and get it signed by your father, my father. And so I was a wreck. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm only 7 years old. How bad is my life going to be when I grow up? Thankfully, though, after many years of therapy, after meditation and prayer and my abiding faith, today at the age of 62, I can say I am only mildly neurotic.
Thank you.
But see, and that was great because listen to the narrative that he created, right? He has this experience. He makes like a mistake that any kid is going to make. And then he starts to develop this narrative like, oh my God, what does this say about the rest of my life or something like that? Can you identify with that? Can you identify with your mind and how your mind creates a story and a narrative about so many things? And so in a sense, we're all walking around with that who we think we are the things that have happened to us, and then the conclusions that we have made about ourselves. And we're walking around, and we could call that like a person. Like, this is me. You know? I really think that the most powerful spirituality, the most powerful thing in terms of what we're about a good shepherd, we're flawed and we make mistakes. Sure, we have to learn and try to understand why we're doing what we're doing. But I just don't think that to have this narrative that we have this beautiful planet Earth, it's so great, it's so fantastic. God creates us, and then all of a sudden there's this narrative that God has to send his son to die on a cross in order for us to be forgiven. And of course, there's also the narrative that, and if you don't believe that, then you're going to perish. You can even see people on the television where they're saying, you know, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son that all who believe in him might not perish. It's almost like as if, like, is that really good news? Right? So it starts to become that Christianity becomes, I want to be a certain way so that I could get rewarded. And I also want to be a certain way so that I could avoid being punished. And that becomes the motivating factor of our behavior. And I wonder, is that kind of lame? Does that really create a transformation in us? Because I'd like to say, we're not here. Human beings aren't called to be good so that we can go to heaven and get rewarded or to avoid the punishment of going to hell. Christ calls us to be our highest self, to come from love, to come from charity and forgiveness and compassion. Because that's our nature. That's who we are. And what we're trying to do is together help each other live our life completely aligned with being who you are, a being that is created in the image and likeness of God, a being that is love, and a being really that is very powerful, created in the image and likeness of the living God. But what happens, right? We have this awareness. I know here it is 9:30 in the morning. We have this awareness, and then what we do is we have this ego and our mind. And I guess we need our ego because there are things that are scary. We need to be careful how we're driving a car, or we don't want to, go down some place that might be a dangerous place to be in. So there is a certain amount of instinct that we have of, hey, this is dangerous. I gotta avoid that, which is a good thing. But it morphs into fearing not just like this particular situation, but living almost pervasively in a sense of fear and worry and stress. And the mind wants to keep on pulling us in that direction. And yet, what I want to say to you this morning is to awaken. That's not who you are. You're not your mind, and you're not the things that your mind is telling you that you are. That's a narrative that you're making up. And I was talking to somebody, and I always like to refer to the Wizard of Oz. I love that scene where, Oz, the great, how dare you come here? And Dorothy and the Scarecrow, I'm sorry, sir, bring me the broom and the witch, and they're shaking in their shoes, right? So if we think of that image as it wants to pull us in to only focus on that, just like our mind and our ego wants to pull us in, so we kind of lose a sense of who we really are, our real true nature. And isn't it interesting? Who pulls the curtain around that side thing and we see that old guy pressing all the buttons? Who does that? Toto, the living creature that has no ego. I said, wow, that's great. So, in other words, they're so caught up in all that, and they're just identifying with it, where Toto, that means nothing to him. Toto doesn't have a mind. Toto doesn't have a narrative, right? If you have a dog, right? You don't come home and your dog's like, where have you been? Do you have any idea what time it is? They're just totally present. They're totally in the now. And they're just always trying to love you. They might be angling for a biscuit, but they're always there present. I thought, yeah, it almost needs to break down the ego in order to discover the truth. The truth of who we really are. And suddenly, once they see the guy with the curtain, and they kind of understand what's going on, like that, they realize there was nothing ever to be afraid of. That isn't real. That's an image that the only power that image can have is if it can get you to believe that it's real. And by the way, isn't it interesting when you look at like Exorcist 3? Years ago, George C. Scott, he's in there and he's going to this possessed, who are you? What are you? And this guy, whatever is possessed, says, I am nothing. I am no thing. Wow. So in other words, negativity, fear, worry, this sense of like, you're going to hell, it's all about like, if you believe it, it's very, very real. But if you can see, that's nothing. You're free. You're free to live and enter into the state of being that Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. We have to recognize this mind that pulls us in, and it causes us to lose sense of just being present, just being this awareness right now. Now, I don't know, if you think about it, think of all the things that have happened to you, right? Where are they now? They're not happening anymore. But the mind remembers, and the mind then buys into it, and the mind wants to tell you that's who you are. You are how you were treated. You are the various things that happened to you. Where, no, you've always been this eternal awareness that's experiencing these things. And then what we have to do is we have to learn and grow from those things. Isn't it interesting that people, we probably don't know, but people who are born in unbelievable wealth, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're born into that. Very often they grow, as they become an adult, they haven't grown. Everything's been given to them. Everything's handed to them on a silver platter. And consequently, when they become an adult, they haven't grown. The Vanderbilt children didn't know how to tie their shoes when the nanny was sick. What are we going to do? Who will dress us? Well, you're 17 years old. I think you should be able. But not if everything's been done for you all the time. So we can, when you think about some of the suffering, some of the things that have happened to us, the heartaches and the hurts and disappointments, in some way, what I think we're realizing is that as human beings, we need these things in order to grow and develop, that we're here to grow and develop, and to learn and understand and grow from the things that have happened to us, but not to identify that the things that have happened to us are who we are. So I was thinking of this, supposing, this is another thing that's corrupt.
Look at me.
Okay, probiotics. Berries, peaches, probiotics, really good, you know. This is great. This is important, this is necessary. So I'm going to carry this around with me because I can use this, right? But now, what if I were to look inside and realize it's empty? There's nothing in here. It's nothing. It's a bunch of cardboard. Once I recognize that there's nothing in this, that this is not the probiotics, this is not the berries and the peaches, what would you say to me if I was walking around with an empty box of cereal? Right? You'd say, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? Why are you holding on to something that isn't real, that it's nothing? You would be able to drop it in a heartbeat. What if you were able to drop the fears and the anxieties and the different things that have happened to you in your life and just be completely open and present? And I believe that the risen Christ gives us the power to heal and overcome the difficult things that we have experienced. Such a powerful part of Catholic Christianity, that you live with a power beyond yourself to heal you and to help you discover who you really are. We hear it all the time. I pray, Father, that they become one as you and I are one. Everything I do comes and flows through the Father and the source of all of life. We can get distracted. We can lose a sense of who we are. But imagine if we could live. See, right now, get in touch with your present right now. Get a sense of yourself. You're looking this way. Get a sense of your awareness. Look at something. You can look at the flowers, the candle, the crucifix. Get a sense of that you're an awareness that's noticing whatever you're noticing. That's eternal. That's always going to be for you. You're always going to be conscious. You're always going to be aware. They've discovered consciousness exists independent of the brain. Consciousness isn't in the brain. Consciousness is independent of that. What if we were to discover that we are part of the living God and we're an energy, we're this consciousness, this life in this body, and we're here to grow. And we're going to experience a lot of different things, right? There's going to be problems, there's going to be heartaches, there's going to be things that we have to grow and develop through that. And then there's going to come a time when your body doesn't work. And then you're going to leave your body. And you're going to experience something that is so incredible that you would never want to leave. As St. Paul says, we're here. We're kind of a little bit away from our home. In a way, the kingdom of heaven is always here, so there is that sense of home, but sometimes it's difficult to really get a sense of that. To get that sense that there's this state of being, there's this realm that is beyond everything that we could possibly imagine. To me, I think that's the gospel of Christ. I think that's the good news. I think that we're this little seed that's planted by Christ at Good Shepherd, and he's asking each one of us to grow and develop, to not be into why did this happen to me and why did that happen to me, but to learn from everything that has ever happened to us so that we can grow and that we can love. So again, Christ doesn't call us to be good and holy so that we can go to heaven or that we can avoid going to hell. Christ calls us to recognize that we're a being of love and that we're here to grow and develop. Why? Because that's who we are. And I think that there's nothing more important than for us at Good Shepherd to constantly communicate and get in touch with that Christ is calling you and I to be our highest self, which is who we truly are.